Welcome, heathens and witches, to the Horn
and Cauldron
podcast. Yeah. I'm John Norgrove. This is Julie Norgrove. We're back at it again. What's the business stuff that I have to do at the very beginning? Hey, if you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to like this video, comment below, share, subscribe, and ring the bell. If you're listening to this on your podcast network of choice, leave us a review. That's how we know that we have 9 listeners. Thank you for joining the team. Anywho, today we're just gonna get right into it because I don't remember if there's something else I'm supposed to say. I'm never gonna remember, guys. That's just you have to.
It really is different every time.
That's fine. It happens.
It really is.
You're welcome. It's creative or something. We're gonna protect and not just.
It's better than a pre-recorded intro, I suppose.
Yeah. Or these are all pre-recorded ahead of time. You never know. You'll never know. Whatever. Today we're talking about Pontus and other primordial Greek deities.
Yeah. So Pontus, a deep dive on Pontus, that is, was requested by one of our listeners. So looking at you, Briskcraft, you're welcome. This was actually a really interesting one because there's not a lot out there on Pontus, but there is a bunch of interesting things about Pontus and the type of deity role that Pontus inhabits. So Pontus, or Pontos, is the Greek primordial sea god.
Oh yeah, some people pronounce that Pontos.
Yeah.
Disagree.
Yeah. I actually looked it up. And it is, some people say it with an O. So it's Pontus or Pontos, is a Greek primordial sea god, a Protogenoi. But he isn't just the god of the sea, he is the personification of the sea. But it is important not to confuse him with Oceanus, the personification of the ocean, or Poseidon, the god of the ocean and waters and everything there. They are completely separate entities according to the Greek system. But
it's totally reasonable. Seas are very different than oceans when you're boating about.
Yeah, that is true. Absolutely.
So, yeah.
And in the Mediterranean, there are several different seas round there in addition to the Mediterranean. And then there's also the ocean on like the far side. So, it's pretty, it makes a lot of sense why they would separate that.
Sure.
But in order to go forward, we really need to talk about animism first.
Sure, yeah.
So...
Yeah, those are those books that on the front cover they have like a child and then they transform into like a bug or a horse or like a dinosaur or whatever.
Isn't that Animorphs?
That is Animorphs, that's correct, yes.
That is not... You know what's funny is that is not what we're talking about, but that is surprisingly close to what we're talking about.
It's kind of close, yeah, I know. That's why I said it. Plus, those were banger books. Who else read Animorphs as a kid? Man, I loved those books.
I did not.
This is the thing. I loved those books, and I read and owned a shitload of those books. I can tell you zero information about those books. Like, the knowledge of the books themselves, vacuum in my head. It's just a vague memory of enjoyment. And, like, the front covers, which I loved all the front covers. Yeah, 100%, right? Animorphs is in that space with, like, Goosebumps.
Yeah.
And that one that we watched, that like, British Goosebumps show that we watched the kid show on. Whatever the heck that one was called.
Yeah. I was kind of like a disaffected teen who was too cool for everything at the time that those came out.
No
so
such
I
thing
did
as
not
too
read
cool
those.
It's like being too cool for the Power Rangers. Absolutely fucking impossible. Nobody's too cool for the Power Rangers.
For a time.
Have you seen the White Ranger? So cool.
Yeah. I said for a time.
Cooler than any of us. Yeah. You were just wrong.
Cool.
You were just wrong. No, it's okay to be wrong. Listen, it's fine. Yeah. We forgive you. On behalf of the Power Rangers. Yeah. And Goosebumps. And Animorphs. Yeah.
So, animism. Animism is the belief that all things have a spirit.
Yeah.
That is, that all or most objects specifically possess a sentient spirit. Animism kind of plays out in a lot of different ways throughout different cultures and belief systems throughout the world. So I'm not going to go into specifics of animism because it's very, very different depending on the location, people peoples who have the belief as well as the time frame that belief happened.
Yeah.
But most cultures throughout the world have used animism as a religious and spiritual practice at some point in time. And that's not to say that it's only animism. Sometimes it's blended. You know, there's like a lot of variation here. There are some anthropologists though that think that it was more common in ancient times and played a huge role in how ancient people perceived and made sense of the world.
How can anthropologists think that it was more common in ancient times? It's not common now, and it was kind of common then.
Yes.
Therefore, that seems like one of those, like some anthropologist was like, listen, it was probably more common then, and they're like, book deal.
I mean, the thing about
like,
this stuff
ridiculous.
is it's kind of tough to research because none of these people agree with each
sure.
other.
Yeah, sure, sure.
And they're always like, you kind of go into
it's because you're reading a scroll and then being like, that probably means
this is what I think this means.
Yeah, sure, totally,
and then you have like the aliens people, and then you have the like race supremacist people.
You have the aliens people.
I
fair.
just recently learned that there are people who think that the Egyptians went over to South America to build the Mayan pyramids.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm just like, what
How? Yeah. Why?
Why?
Yeah.
I mean, like...
Listen, the Mayans taught the aliens, and then the aliens went over and taught the Egyptians.
Oh, that must be it. They have it backwards.
Yeah.
So, some anthropologists think that it was more common in ancient times than it is today, and that it made like a big impact on people because they were like, we don't understand why this stuff is happening, so like we're just gonna assume that this particular thing is possessed of a spiritual power.
Sure, yeah.
To deify it.
Well, humans love anthropomorphizing like insane shit. I would like to vaguely gesture at robots about that. Like, right?
Yeah.
You know? Like, how many people have, or hell, like a Tamagotchi or some shit? Like, we anthropomorphize the shit out of stuff, right?
Yeah, we absolutely do.
So, like, it would make sense that people, like, did that in ancient times, in current times, like, throughout all of time.
Yeah.
And, like, the interesting thing would be, like, kind of, from my perspective, it's like, what did we learn from it as a, like, did we just use it as a linguistic thing, right? Like, to describe something as having character or animus or spirit is an easier way to sort of, like, cope with the fact that sometimes shit do weird stuff.
Maybe.
You know?
But also, maybe
you know?
everything sort of has a distinct spirit associated with it. It plays out in a lot of different cultures. Like in Japanese culture, you have items where if they're used for a certain amount of time, they develop their own spirit. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff, even to this day, that we see. But we see a lot of instances.
I mean, listen, I talk to trees and rocks and just like all kind of shit. So yeah,
absolutely.
I completely get it, right?
Yeah.
But like, I wonder where the, like, it was useful as a tool, which is what it sounds like. It's like it plays a huge role in the ancient people's, like, perception of making sense of the world. Like, I want to know where the, like, tool ends and the, like, faith begins.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
From an anthropological standpoint, of course, not like, I mean, obviously from a practical standpoint it would be gangster. But since time travel isn't a thing yet, guys, get on it.
Yeah, right.
At least from an anthropological standpoint. That would be dope.
It would be interesting to
maybe somebody can make like a History Channel special about it. So long as they take the aliens guy and lock him in the basement first.
You know, I feel like to get a good special on it, we probably have to find somebody on YouTube. There's a ton of people.
Yeah, that's a
great
YouTube
documentaries on YouTube.
That's a YouTube doc, not a bloody not
infotainment.
Yeah. Oof,
yeah.
Well, I mean, whatever, bro. Like, YouTube is basically all... It's like, all
That's
infotainment.
True. That's true.
But it's just, like, less toxic and idiot.
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
High-value production, like, high production cable is sometimes garbage.
Yeah. Yeah. We find ourselves watching less and less of it as time goes on. And
way more YouTube docuseries, let me tell you what.
Yeah.
Half our YouTube subs are just, like... infotainment people.
Yeah.
Heavy on the info.
And that's kind of, sort of, what we're doing right now.
Yes, Inception. Infoception.
Yeah, look at that. We're breaking that fourth wall there. Talking about
Infoception.
Talking about the thing. It's like when they say the title of the movie in the movie. did the thing.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
anyway, we see lots of instances of animism in the
Mhm,
Greek
mhm,
pantheon.
mhm.
And Pontus is really just one small example. Most of the Protogenoi, the like sort of first gen of Greek deities, you know, they're the gods that created what we recognize today as the Greek pantheon,
Yeah.
are animist concepts. And Pontus specifically is the god of the sea and all of its creatures. He doesn't really have any epithets to like call him by, but he generally appears as in art as the giant head of a middle-aged man with a beard that's kind of usually gray that turns into the waters of the sea. And a lot of times there are sea creatures in
Does
there.
does his bread turn into the water?
I saw that.
So on our notes here, well, on our notes, on her notes here, it says watery gray beard in parens. His bread turns into water. Obviously, just a typo, but maybe also though bread into water, right?
I mean, that's yeah.
I mean,
Not
but ain't nobody want no soggy ass bread.
I mean, no, not at all.
Yeah. Bread soup, bread
It's
soup.
croutons.
Croutons are
Beard
the
and
exact
bread
opposite of
have
soggy.
the exact same letters, and Microsoft Word just like auto corrects things. So yeah, his beard sort of like turns into the waves of the sea, and oftentimes you'll see like images of sea creatures like in the beard, like not like they're trapped, but like they're hanging out, just
Yeah.
chilling, they're buddies. And he also usually has crab claw horns. I do not know if they're prehensile, so my imagining is
just
yes.
in my mind? It's just like a big dumb floating head with crab claw horns.
Yeah.
And like not there's no body associated. Is that what we're talking about
Yes,
here?
that's exactly what we're talking
Super
about.
here for it. I'm
Yeah.
super here for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
just a big creepy floating head.
yeah, just like a big,
Just
but
like
he's like in
what
the
I'm hoping
water,
is like a
so-
big head, like a 6 foot tall head.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Just like a bunch of head, claws, just click clacking around up here.
Yeah.
Just doing their thing.
You're basically describing the art that I found.
Yeah, okay. Cool.
Associated
Does
with
he
him.
walk on the claws upside down face?
No, he just sort of like stays there. He doesn't really walk around.
He didn't like move or nothing?
No.
I mean, I guess he's the water, so like the water's him moving or whatever.
Yeah, he just sort of like appears, I guess. It's unclear.
Could you imagine being at sea, like if you're like an ancient person at the Mediterranean, like in a in like a ancient like an old timey boat, and you're like out at the sea or whatever, and you hear a like hey you over there, and you're like the fuck is this? And you look over the boat, and there's just like a big watery bearded head with crab claws, and it's just like, hey, what are you doing inside of me right now? You'd be like, no, we're gonna go inland. Never mind with this wet stuff. Yeah, that's why they don't have a word for the color blue. Listen, they were just like, this sea thing, never mind it for a while. There's big floating crab heads in there. I don't like any of that shit. Shut it down immediately. Yeah, that explains it. I get it. Yeah, I'm here for it.
So, Pontus is sort of related to a bunch of different people. His parents his mom is Gaia,
Sure.
and in some myths she birthed him just like autonomously, and in some he is
asexually.
Yes.
Okay.
She just birthed him.
She birthed him
asexually.
with like a robot, autonomously.
We were just
like with some
talking
sort
about
of a machine.
Yeah, it's robots. If it's not aliens, then it's robots.
Yeah, if it's not aliens.
And
it's
in
robots,
some
that's right.
myths, Gaia and Aether are his parents. His siblings are literally all of Gaia's children, so direct children specifically, so everything.
Yeah.
And consorts are Gaia,
Also Gaia.
his sister mother.
Yeah,
sister, mother, wife.
We don't think about that.
Yeah. And Thalassa, another sort of like elder being.
What's Thalassa the anamorph of?
Just like a lady who's like a sea deity.
Ah.
Yeah.
So it's like a little masturbatory.
A little, yeah. And his children, he has several of them, and it's interesting, these children are all related to the sea, but they're all very purpose-driven. So there is Nereus, who's typically called the Old Man of the Sea, his son by Gaia. Nereus is the father of the Nereids, and one of Poseidon's wives is the Nereids.
Okay, cool.
There's Thaumas, his child by Gaia, and they are sort of the wonder. They're called the wonder of the sea. So essentially, the deity Thaumas, which sometimes is portrayed as a female and sometimes as a male, is portraying the most dangerous aspects of the sea. So
wonder, not the word I was thinking of when dangerous is brought in. But
yeah, I think that they mean horrifying wonder.
Yeah.
And then there's Phorcus, who is Pontus's child again by Gaia, who is another sea god and is married to Keto, Ceto. Also, Keto is one of Pontus's children with Gaia, who is a sea goddess.
There were like less gods back then.
Yeah,
so you had to dip in,
and Keto is the mother of monsters. That includes the Gorgons, the Echidna, and specifically Medusa.
The small rodent, the Echidna?
No.
You know, like an echidna?
Yes, it's not that. No.
Oh, well, that's
it's
no
like,
fun.
It's like a mythological being.
It would have been real dope if she was like, oh, listen, I got like these like tentacle head snake ladies, and I got these like attacking bird monster things, and look, I got this cute one. Look at this one, turned out pretty okay. Echidnas are weird, and then this other one, they're just assholes, right? Yeah. It's the cute sheep of the monster family.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
It's the what's the daughter from the Munsters? It's like that, Lily Munster.
Yeah.
No, that's the mom.
No, that's the mom. What's the daughter?
I don't know.
I want to say Sherry Moon Munster, and I know that's
that's
wrong,
not it at all.
That's what
so Pontus's child also is Eurybia, which is a daughter through Gaia again, and she is the goddess of the mastery / the power of the seas. So particularly popular with sailors.
Yeah.
And then with Thalassa, his children are the Telchines, as well as all other sea creatures, and sort of sometimes in certain mythologies, Aphrodite. Yeah. So if you're interested in more Olympian family tree stuff, we talk about the Olympian family tree, like the standard sort of 12 plus Olympian, like most popular Olympian gods. I think there's actually like 15 or 17.
The brand name Olympian gods.
Yeah. We have an episode on that. And I did not write down the episode number, so you'll just have to find it. I don't know that episode numbers are even particularly helpful, but
2,342.
No. And then we also have a deep dive on Aphrodite, which might be particularly interesting as well, because we talk a lot about her origin story. So that is Pontus, and that's pretty much all that we have of him. So you can kind of take a look at the idea behind what Pontus represents, being the like personification of the sea, and you can also look to other cultures to see what their personification of the sea god is. Of course, you could lend things from Poseidon, but Pontus is kind of like his own dude, and you can kind of take a lot out of it. So he's sort of like all of the bits of the sea. And you could, of course, look to Oceanus within the Greek pantheon. And you could even look to other, like, more seafaring cultures, too, to see what they are describing for their god of the seas. And sort of take a lot of that with the animism of it. But because there isn't a lot of, like, historical information about who and if and how people worshipped Pontus, we don't really have a lot to go on there, but there are other Greek primordial deities that we do have some information about. So this is kind of like the rest of the first gen, so you can kind of see like where one begins and another one ends.
Sure.
So they all started with chaos. That is the god of the void. That's the space and the time before creation itself, so the nothingness. It's also the gap between heaven and earth and infinity. And you can sort of treat these as the like correspondences of these deities as well. And I know that we don't have like the herbs and the colors and the stones and stuff, but you can kind of just the primordial deities, you can kind of just either take from other things that you're interested in, or go with like real, like instinctual type of correspondences there.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, like if Pontus is the primordial god of the sea, then like, you know, shells and like sea sea things.
Crab claws.
Obviously crab claws.
Fish bones.
If you have particularly
and
watery
skulls.
beard bits, that's probably there. Yeah, if you got like some wet beard just sitting around.
That's gross.
Yeah, it's fucking awful, man.
That's gross. Thanks.
Yeah.
But no
But
thanks.
like, isn't there like a seagrass or like a seaweed or something that's called like something
old man's beard? Several.
Yeah.
Yes.
So like there you go. If you got some wet beard, like if you got fish tank, maybe if you do like a salt fish tank, you plant like a little bit of Pontus beard up in there.
Yeah, well, and seas can be freshwater as well.
Oh
so-
sure, yeah, sure.
Yeah. So that's not necessarily a saltwater, freshwater type of thing. But yeah, absolutely. You can use pretty much anything that you would assume coming from the sea. And you know what, really, I can't imagine that things coming from the ocean would be worse. Where we live, like, we don't have a sea nearby.
We ain't got no seas.
We just have the ocean, and like rivers and lakes and stuff. So for us, it's more along the lines of like what works, in it. So it's kind of taking things a little bit more like chaos magic to sort of like inform your magical practice by what it is that you have handy and around you and sort of creating from that.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So next up is Gaia, the goddess of the earth, the mother of all life. She's also a goddess of fertility and abundance and all of those things. There were definitely cults associated with Gaia.
Big wet green rocks screaming through the sky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What?
Big wet green rocks screaming through the sky. That's what Earth is, bro.
Oh, geez. Okay, that's... I did not know where you were going with that.
Yeah. Dry red rock, Mars. There you go.
That's fair. Yeah. So, you can also look to any sort of correspondences for Demeter for Gaia, and that's pretty much there. Also Hera, if you're keeping with the Greek deities, obviously. Isis is another good one. Uranus, who is the god of the sky. He's the lord of the rain, and he sits on the highest seat. So Uranus is an interesting one. You could also call him Uranus if you're particularly weird about saying the word Uranus.
Why would you be weird about the word Uranus?
Some people are very specific about it.
Oh, because of the fifth grade Uranus thing.
Yes.
Oh my god.
Yes.
Oh, that's okay.
So
that's ridiculous.
Uranus is an interesting one.
If somebody was like, "Oh man, the other day I was reading something about Uranus," I would be like, "Oh, what is that? Like a science fiction thing or something?" I would 100% not think Uranus at all if somebody did not pronounce it Uranus, like in the slightest, dude.
Like, oh, who's that?
Yeah, genuinely, I would just be like, "Oh, that's super interesting." Is that like a Star Wars character or something? Is it like a bounty hunter or something? You know? Yeah, there's no way I would make that guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So because Uranus is the god of the sky, he's the one who's like above everything. So he seems to me as a particularly interesting one to ask for rain sort of things, like or anything associated with the rain, but also for perspective.
Yeah.
And I sort of had that epiphany while I was doing research on this and thought that that was a super dope way to use these primordial deities in a different way.
Sure, yeah.
Next up, we have Oria, who is the god of the mountains. I have, there was no other information about it. A lot of this stuff comes from like poems and like old writings.
I feel like primordial Greek god of the mountains is like a straight line of informational logic.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Like, yes, that's correct. You know?
Yeah, exactly. Next up is Tartarus.
Yep.
And according to Plato, this is the place where souls are judged after death and where the worst punishments are given. So like the pits of Tartarus.
Sure.
But Tartarus is both a place and a person. And Tartarus is associated primarily with judgment when you're looking at it in kind of a metaphysical aspect. There's a lot of myths that mention Tartarus, and usually when you're looking at a myth that mentions Tartarus, you're looking at it being used as a place and not a person or a concept, which is primarily what we're talking about today.
Yeah, is the concept of Tartarus.
Yeah.
The anamorph of Tartarus. When a jail cell transforms into a god. Yeah. It's a weird Animorphs book, but don't worry about it.
It's not wrong, though. It's not wrong. Yeah. Next up, we have Erebus, who is the god of darkness and also the place where souls go past right after they die. Erebus is not to be confused with... Erebus as darkness is not to be confused with night. So there's darkness and then there is light.
Night, but yes.
Yeah, there's darkness and then there's light and then there's night and then there's day.
Yeah.
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 So that's Erebus. Next up is Ether, the god of the bright upper sky or the heavens. This is also usually conflated with the god of light. So if you're looking at anything to shine a light on something, if you're looking for, again, perspective from above, like looking at things at, like, in corporate speak, the 10,000 foot level.
Ugh.
I hate that.
Ugh.
Oh man.
Don't speak corporate here.
I have to wash my mouth out with some wine.
We don't do that. We don't do that corporate shenanigery here.
Oh, that's better. Okay. You can also look at Ether as kind of the god of just light in general.
Sure.
So, if your power goes out, maybe pray to Ether. Knock on wood. Sure. Next is Nyx, the goddess of night. And Nyx is usually portrayed as having black wings or being surrounded by a dark mist or carrying a dark scarf. Nyx didn't have any known temples, but interestingly enough, it was common to see statues of her in other cults' temples, like the worshipping of the darkness or the honoring of night was a regular thing. She's also the patron goddess of any black animal, of shadow work, and any work with her should be done at night.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool.
And next is Hemera, who is basically Nyx's roommate. They live in Tartarus, and when Nyx...
The guy or the place?
The place. But maybe also the guy. I don't know.
Yeah.
Animism is a fun thing.
Yeah.
So Nyx, when Nyx goes out to, like, bring the night upon the world, Hemera is home. And when Hemera is out bringing the day, then Nyx is home. And they kind of never see each other. So they're like the best roommates.
Yeah.
Because
Sweet
they're...
roommate deal.
Yeah, because they're never
They always have the
using,
whole
like,
house
the
to
laundry.
themselves.
They always have the whole house to themselves.
Yeah,
There's
totally,
none of that worrying there. And any work with Hemera should be done during the day. This is not to be confused with Eos, goddess of the dawn, or with Helios or Apollo, gods of the sun. You can see they're sort of the same, but also slightly different things. And when we look at a lot of ancient religions, we basically see that.
Yeah.
So you can really see animism kind of coming to life in this, because we're taking individual concepts and assigning them a spiritual essence, a deity, if you will.
Sure.
And then lastly, which is Eros, which is super interesting because Eros is sometimes named as the son of Aphrodite and Ares. However, that is a newer concept in Greek mythos than originally. Originally, Eros was the god of love and desire and sex and lust and passion and all of those things.
Sure.
And it wasn't until much, much later on that he was sort of changed to be the son of Aphrodite and Ares.
Yeah.
And also, another thing that changed is his portrayal. Originally, he appeared as a young man, a young, like, hot dude.
Sure.
And then later on, he was portrayed as a baby with wings. This got super popular during the Renaissance, when they started looking back at classical Greek times and going, gosh, times would be so much better back then, guys. And then made like a whole bunch of paintings.
Yeah.
And that's not the first time we see baby with wings.
That, like,
but
weird psycho falsification of ancient Greek beliefs and literature, because it was like fashionable with the bourgeoisie.
Yeah, basically. That was like the Renaissance version of cottagecore.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah, it's super interesting, but that is not the first time he was shown as a baby with wings. I don't know when the first time that one was, but
maybe
it went back
always a baby
further
with
than
wings.
that. I mean, yeah, you know what? He's a primordial deity. I'm pretty sure he can show up however he wants.
That's fair. Yeah.
So,
He's just gonna do whatever's going on.
Yeah.
He's gonna do whatever's going on there.
Yeah. Whatever he desires.
Yeah. Gross.
Yeah.
Oh.
So that is a list of the primordial deities and some ideas for how you can work with them. Most pantheons have their own primordial deities, and you can kind of take a look back at them. So this is not an uncommon concept. We're just talking about it here in this space to kind of handle Pontus and get some ideas out there. So this is kind of like an interesting concept that we have. So we would really love to hear what other people think about this. So definitely,
like, do you work with any primordial deities, or does your practice involve any? Obviously, if you have like bonus Pontus information, like hit it up. Like I often think when you're talking about primordial deities or any sort of a like pre the TM, right? Like the B squad of that particular practice's Justice League or Avengers, because you've got like you got your main cast of the. I'm going to use the Justice League as an example here. This is the way that I kind of think about this in my head. You got your main cast of Justice League, right? You've got your Superman, you've got your Batman, you've got your Flash, you've got your Green Lantern, you got your Martian Manhunter. You got your big mainstays, right? But then you got a bunch of like B. You got the guy that can make bouncy balls come out of his skin or whatever.
The gold balls
shit.
guy.
You got the gold balls guy, right? Or you got the guy who's also fast, but like not as useful. One of my favorite B squatters is the like stretchy dude whose power is just that he's like mad stretchy.
Oh yeah.
The Stretch Armstrong guy.
Yeah.
Like so you got your like B cast of stuff, right? So the way that I always think about it, and I don't mean B as in like a degrading or negative way, because honestly I can't stand most of the A list for the Justice League. So I guess my like look on this is primarily the like TM gods, right? Is that you have your like TM gods. You've got your registered trademark like big name gods, and then you've got all these other gods kind of interspersed in there, and like. You hear this talked about a lot, especially with like Greek gods, where it's like, oh, like Aphrodite's Aphrodite, but like she was probably this other person before that who was like faith for these people, and before that, or at the same time as that, she was also this other person that was being worshipped by like these people over here or whatever. So I often wonder whenever we talk about like primordial gods, it like. Not necessarily what specifically we're talking about, but like at what point in time did like the Greek main like Justice League squad kind of like wrap them up during the like great expansion of the empire, for a lack of better words, right? Because like when you have like disparate locations and people sort of like co-developing shit, like I mean obviously like any coastal region is gonna have some sort of a like deity for that wet salty stuff out there, right?
And probably
to, like, deal with it.
probably multiple ones dealing with different aspects, like we see with Pontus.
Oh yeah, like how some of his kids are like hey, this one's in charge of like the scary bits, and this one's in charge of like calm waters, and like this one's in charge of like nice days and shit like that. Sure, yeah, that's the like sort of, I look at that as the sort of like the like sort of textural wrinkling of time, right?
Yeah.
That like how the phone game persists change, and then we try and like rationalize that change as like a worshiping people or what have you. But like for me, it's interesting to see like what Pontus is associated with, right? And then where they were able to like sort of like shave some stuff off because it overlaps with, for example, like Oceanus or Poseidon, and where they like left the stuff, right? Because like Poseidon isn't generally talked about as being like the physical manifestation of the ocean.
Yeah.
Right? He's like the god. He's like the dude with abs sitting in a fucking marble chair.
Yeah.
But like can control the ocean. Aquaman-esque style.
Yeah.
Right? But like, what about all the other water-based superheroes?
Yeah.
Right? What about all the other water-based gods? Where do they fall into that? And I think that this fits a lot with the whole like Eros is the son of Aphrodite or whatever, where you're like, oh yeah, like inevitably we kind of had to like circle that back around because it kind of makes the most amount of sense.
Yeah.
Right? So like the phone game meant that we sort of like shaved enough off that now all of a sudden like this deity sort of plugs in down here. Where like, all right, well, he's like the child of Aphrodite, even though like potentially, like he's not, and he's his own thing, or like possibly earlier he wasn't and was his own thing, and Aphrodite came from like Pontus and some other shit, right? And like especially this is like I think it's just the nature of like we probably have the most information about Greek myth.
We really do.
Right?
We really do.
Like,
and that's one of the reasons why we keep coming back to it so often
yeah.
with things is it's easily accessible to like most people living in Western culture.
Sure, yeah.
Like now. So it's pretty easily accessible.
Technically, all the Greek gods
there's
are
a lot of information.
DC superheroes also. So like it makes it like easier to get into. It's like all of a sudden Norse stuff is easier to talk about and research because you have like a bunch of people talking about it, partially because of Marvel and partially because like Viking shows got like super hot for like 10 years.
Yeah. And that's not to say that there isn't a lot of information or that things aren't as accessible for other pantheons, right?
Oh, sure,
but
of course.
If
like
you
there's
stop
a ton of Egyptian stuff out there, and there's like a ton of stuff.
If you stop
for, like,
an average
Indian.
person on the street, it's pretty easy to understand. It's pretty easy to guess that they'll probably understand at least one or two things about.
I would bet dime for dollar if you stop any rando on the street and you ask them to name a god, what with isn't standard issue Judeo-Christian god, they're gonna say a Greek god. They're gonna say like Zeus or some shit. You know what I'm saying?
Or Thor.
Like that, or Thor, just because of the Marvel movies.
Yeah.
Right? But like, you know what I'm saying? Like I feel like they're high enough up there. That like they're the main ones that we're going to talk about these things. But like to the thing that I was saying earlier, like it's interesting to see where the overlaps occur and where like it would make sense for Pontus to also fill the space of like other things, but it's just like not talked about.
Yeah.
Because like, oh, well, like we already have Poseidon for that shit.
Yeah.
Or whatever. So that's kind of like the way that I often think about like this sort of like ancient myth stuff when I'm reading a book right now on giants, like Norse, like primordial giants in Norse mythology, and how like you can see where like it sort of like evolves in and out of what we currently talk about as like giants and Jotuns in Norse mythology. So it's an interesting way to analyze those things and think about that when we're doing our research or like looking into a deity, right? Yeah. Especially if you're like, let's say like worshiping one of these primordial deities or trying to work with one of these primordial deities, and it's like, oh well, like just because theoretically like Pontus doesn't do ocean stuff, but like if you're in our ocean region, like maybe Pontus is working with you, right? Because it's like Pontus is Pontus, but like for you Pontus contains some of the same like spirit or what have you, like actionable whatever godness over like ocean shit also. Yeah. Or whatever. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, and there's also sort of the like personal alignment of it too. So like even if you lived like say in like Arizona, in the US where there like aren't any seas nearby, that doesn't mean that you can't work with Pontus. Yeah. And I find that for me, it's really helpful to understand like, okay, well, like going backwards in time, what did that look like? What did that worship look like before Pontus? And what did that look like in areas near where this deity was worshipped? Because you're kind of like peeling off the layers of the onion. And, maybe you get to the end and there's nothing. You're like, okay, well, this seems to be a fairly totally original concept at this core.
Well, and if you're working with, let's say, the ocean or the sea, and you're like, Poseidon and I, not homies. Oceanus and I, not homies. Pontus and I feel more like homies, then like that's the interpretation of the sea. Like one of the things that we sort of like follow is the wrong word, but like follow is kind of the best word, is this idea that like your practice is your own. Like if Pontus for you is a different Pontus than Pontus is for me conceptually, then like that's fine. Right? Yeah. Because like the texture of faith and practice in ancient times was one of the myriad, one of like infinite, personalization, right? Yeah. And I think that like the idea that like you need to follow the like grade 1 source Pontus, this gatekeeping is a great example of this, and we talked about this in one of the episodes previously, where it's just like, I worship. If you worship Pontus in a specific way, and I'm like, well, I've done research on Pontus, and like what you're doing, like that's a sea star, or like that, that's like an ocean star, not a sea star, right? Yeah. So you can't use that on your Pontus altar. Like if for you that's that ocean star or whatever is like a thing that like vibes with you and your Pontus, then like that's fine, right? And especially when we're talking about like primordial gods or gods that we don't have like a ton of information about, or a ton of like grade 1, like A1 information, and it's mostly just like it's assholes like us just talking into the void, making decisions about stuff, right? Like you should be looking to do a thing like in your way. If your way is this book is the book that I like and this book says this is what I should do, like rock and roll, dude. That makes everything easier. Do that shit.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, if you want to start a whole personal religion based on a book that you particularly are into, I mean, we've got a whole
there's a bunch of them.
We've got a whole slew of books that
Yeah.
we would like to, and religions that we'd like to tell you about.
Yeah.
But no. This is like a really good point. Like, we talk about this in the Aphrodite deep dive, where in certain cultures, Aphrodite was worshipped not only as like a love goddess and a mother goddess, but also as a war goddess. And there's nothing wrong with that different interpretation.
Yeah.
You know, the thing about the thing that's so hard about all of this, like going back to like see what the ancients did. Like I see this a lot when I do research into Norse mythology and Norse like religious practices, is there's a lot of people that want to do things the way that the ancients did, and I absolutely get that because I am very much that way too. Yeah. But you're basically at the whim of someone,
whomever interpretations you found,
whose work miraculously survived literally thousands of years of stuff. So you're looking at that person's personal body. You know, imagine going imagine that like somebody, you know, some random person's blog is found thousands of years in the future talking about, talking about something, and people are like, oh, obviously this is how everybody like worshipped this particular thing or this deity, like Chronicles of Leibowitz. Which we've talked about before. So it's like, you know, you can only get so far with the historical research of it. And I try really hard to blend the historical research of it and my own intuition, as well as what other people in the space are doing. So like, obviously, if you guys want sources for stuff, I can absolutely provide some sources.
Well, and
some of it is not all sources, you know?
Yeah. So and
I don't have like a secret backdoor archaeology lab or anything like that. So a lot of this kind of practice is really taking what matters most to you and taking it home. For me, even though I consider myself a patron of Aphrodite, I don't particularly consider her a war goddess. I actually consider her much similar to the way that when we talked about when we did our Isis deep dive, how people used Isis as kind of like a catch-all female deity. There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. That's just the way that I choose to do my practice for her, which is totally different than anybody else, and I have no problem with that. So it creates an interesting layer because we're basically just working off of it, you know.
Well, what it does is it allows for a more dynamic interaction with other practitioners, right? Because there's always going to be like the 5-dimensional Venn diagram of faith between any group of people or any individual people is such that there are things that overlap and things that don't, and the things that don't overlap add texture to our reality and allow us to like observe new ideas. Sometimes those ideas affect us in a repulsive way, so it pushes us deeper into the way that we believe because we disagree with that interpretation, which there's nothing wrong with disagreeing with something, so long as you're not an asshole about it. And sometimes those new pieces of information, that new opinion affects us in an attractive way, which draws us in that direction. If you think about it as like sort of surfing or like skateboarding or like riding a bike or like rollerblading or ice skating or anything like that, like there is a degree of you commanding the direction you're going, and then there's a degree of you being commanded in the most efficient or simplest or sometimes most dangerous path towards the end of that particular like journey or practice or understanding or belief or faith or what have you. So like when we have like like you worshiping or observing Aphrodite differently than like one of our friends, or differently than like the way that I would observe Aphrodite, or something like that. It allows us to come together in that like sit down common area thing that no longer exists in a lot of first world places, where we all come together and sit down and have open, free, unjudgmental discussions of faith and philosophy and like universal understanding, so that we can all go back to our practice after those conversations and have gained something, gaining new knowledge that changes us in that moves us in a different direction, or potentially gaining knowledge that definitely assures us that we were right all along and that shit's crazy. Both are fine. Exchanges of information,
gaining perspective of somebody else's point of view.
Yeah,
which is also
knowledge
a really
is always
thing.
good because it's knowledge. That's like a straight line of logic. But like, yeah, so if this is one of those things where like if you worship primordial Greek gods, and especially if you worship Pontus, like, is there something different that you do, or is there something that you found in that practice or in your research, right? Because everybody has their like thing that they're gonna like delve more deeply into. Like, have you found something that's different or additional to the stuff that we've said? Obviously, the YouTube algorithm, like, comment below and do all that stuff. But like, that's the kind of stuff that like we would like to facilitate sharing more of.
Yeah. And of course, even if it's not Pontus or a Greek primordial deity, if it's somebody who's either very common or even very uncommon, like, we'd be very interested to hear.
Or does your deity overlap with Pontus in some way? Whether in that way is it being like primordial deity, or being specifically a sea deity or a water deity, or a deity that has like kind of like, oh, like I follow this deity and they equally have no information available and I'm just winging it, thank you very much,
Yeah.
That kind of thing. So and we'll inevitably do a deeper dive into the like the raw animism of like belief and practice. We have like a thing we want to do there, but we just haven't thought it all the way out yet.
We'll probably be doing full episodes on animism and what that looks like across the world, both classically and in a modern sense, as well as Poseidon. We've got a deep dive that we'll be doing. Other sea deities. I mean, really, we've got tons of things that we want to talk about.
Might even do a book review for Animorphs. So if I remember correctly, I think you can crush one of those books in like an hour and a half. They're like very tiny books, if I remember correctly. So yeah, what's up? Did you read Animorphs? Which was your favorite Animorph? I don't have a favorite Animorph because I don't remember enough details, but yeah.
Well, I feel like if somebody's turning into a dinosaur,
like
that's probably my favorite.
Or red, and the guy turned into like a Primanus or something, but I might be mad hallucinating that one.
Maybe.
Yeah,
we'll
I do not
find
remember.
out.
Yeah. I'm just gonna have to start buying Animorph books.
Yeah, time to go on eBay and see if there's any vintage copies.
I have so many books.
We have so many books. We don't have room.
I don't have room.
So we did write some sort of spells. The first one is we do have an invocation for Pontus for you.
These are obviously like not connected to some sort of historical practice or tradition. These are part of like anytime we do a deep dive, we try and kind of like meditate on the information we learned about this particular person, deity, thing, or other sundry chaotic shenan, and try and come up with something to fill a practice with. Like if we've sparked your interest and you're like, oh, this Pontus guy seems pretty gangster, like I would like to do some more stuff with that. We're kind of giving you like a jumping off point with these spells. Yeah. As it were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll have you read that invocation since you did a bunch of work on it.
Yeah, okay, so we have an invocation for Pontus. And heads up, as a practitioner of worshiper of Norse deities, we love bonus names on things. So this is an invocation for Pontus. Pontus, primordial lord of the sea, father to all its creatures, I call upon you and make this offering, and then like provide your like offering to Pontus, whether that's like a food stuff or like a dumb supper or like a bit of your food in like a little, we have like little offering trays we keep.
Or like a bit of water.
Or like a bit of water or like some sort of a like
crab claw.
Yeah, like a shenan that you maybe found.
If you're given crab claws as an offering, just to warn you, like make sure that all the meat's out and make sure to rinse it thoroughly with like soap and water, and then also it should be dried in the oven and not on your altar space. We know from experience.
They can go squirrely Dan.
Please trust.
So provide your offering, and then Lord Pontus, teach me to calm the waters of my soul and find nourishment in the world around me. And then do whatever like ritual or meditation that you've like are planning to do around Pontus or in general for your like particular practice, and then end this invocation with Pontus, living spirit of the sea and father to all who dwell within it, I offer you thanks. And then leave your offering there or dispose of it according to your particular practice and how ants, pests, or pets your house is.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Because like you might want to leave it out, but like raccoons are precocious.
Yeah.
So.
Or house raccoons like dogs.
Or house raccoons like dogs.
Or like house raccoons like actual house raccoons.
I know. Tiny little demon hands.
I love it.
Yeah, they're the best.
And then the next one isn't really so much of a spell as it is a methodology, and that's for water divination. And this is how I like to do water divination, or scrying. So to do this, you'll need a candle, a bowl, preferably in a dark color, but honestly, anything kind of works. It would be best if it's not patterned, but again, if you beggars aren't choosers here. So a bowl. Enough water to fill the bowl, a little bit of sea salt, and a book of shadows or whatever it is that you use to take notes. So, sort of like prepare your space, get ready, get in the mood, get in the zone, and put the bowl in a comfortable place that may be on your altar, that may not be on your altar, and that's totally fine. It is important that you put the bowl somewhere where you're not having to hold it yourself in case you get tired. So maybe that's on your kitchen table or whatever. So put the bowl in a comfortable place and light your candle. Clear your mind, take a few moments to kind of sort out whatever thoughts you've got moving through your head, and then put a pinch of sea salt in the empty bowl. Now fill the bowl with water. You don't have to stir. You could just fill it. It's not necessary to stir. And adjust the candle or the bowl as needed so that the light of the candle reflects on the surface of the water. It is usually best to do this in a dark room so that you can easier see the reflection, but you can do this in the daylight too. It kind of is whatever works best for you. Now, unfocus your eyes and gaze at the reflection in the water and take notes of any images or symbols that you see. And this is, until I figured it out, this unfocus your eyes and gaze, and a lot of times you just say, like divination resources just say gaze at something. So, when you're kind of like spacing out and like daydreaming, but with your eyes open, you're still seeing everything that's around you, and your eyes are kind of unfocused on anything, but you're still seeing everything just fine. That's really what it is that we're talking about here when we're saying gaze at the reflection or unfocus your eyes. It's not necessarily take off your glasses, and it's not stare at it. I find that it works best for me when I sort of let my eyes unfocus, and then I try to keep them unfocused for as long as I can. It's kind of like when you see things in the peripheral of your vision, and you can catch that glimpse, but when you focus on it, it's no longer there. For me, it's sort of the same idea, but not with the peripheral. And you will eventually sort of see images or symbols in the reflection in the water, and that is really what it is that you're looking for. It's best to do this for a few minutes at a time and kind of like take a break. It's hard to unfocus your eyes for a very long time, just like it is hard to squint for a very long time. So, take it easy on yourself, and so do this for a few minutes at a time until you receive a symbol or a message. And you may not get...
Also okay if you don't receive a symbol or a message the first couple of times. Doing this, it's a learned skill. So, you've got to like think about it like one of them CNI what are those called? Magic eye
Yeah.
things, you know? Like, once you're good at them, you can get there quickly. I mean, this is honestly true for any meditative process. But, like until you get comfortable with, like, seeing where that line is, where that change happens, right? And being able to, like, approach it more rapidly, it's going to take time. There's definitely going to be fits and starts about that sort of stuff. Like, be okay with not receiving something and then just being like, all right, I'm going to, like, try this out in a couple hours or whatever.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Like, that's
and
totally fine.
if you see one thing, that doesn't mean that you're going to necessarily see something else. Sometimes that's all it is that you're looking for.
Yep.
I find that it's easier to do this kind of divination when you don't have something in mind that you're trying to get an answer for. And that tends to kind of help.
The question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is water divination for you. I'm sure that we'll be doing an episode later on that's very in depth, talking about different types of scrying and water divination that can be done. But this will hold you over till then.
Yeah. This will tide you.
Yeah.
So yeah, and those two spells, as well as all of the information in this podcast, will be available in a Book of Shadows page. On our Patreon, which, speaking of our Patreon, we would like to thank our patrons, Alan, Miranda, Alexa, Helena, and Somewhere. Thank you for joining us, Somewhere.
Yeah.
And so you guys are keeping us improving every time. Small victories.
Yeah.
Is the way that I look at it.
We appreciate your help.
We definitely appreciate you guys. Yeah, you're our favorite listeners. Everybody's our favorite listener. If you're hearing us, you're our favorite listener
All
too.
10 of you.
All 10 of you, yeah.
Or 11.
Yeah.
We might be up to 11 now, I'm not sure.
Small victories. So next up, the next episode is we have a pub chat coming up after this. I know that we've said that we were going to do that and then we didn't do that, but, like, that's fine. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
We're
finally getting back into the swing of things after having the power
Etsy
out
shop
for a while.
and the power out and just a whole bunch of other stuff.
Yeah.
So we'll have a pub chat coming up, and then after that is Ostara 103.
Yeah.
Flower magic.
Yeah. Ostara is the time of spring and rebirth and new flowers everywhere. So we're kind of getting that early because by the time Beltane comes around, there's a lot of wildflowers that are already done. So we're kind of looking at the earlier part of that season.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, like always, if you have a suggestion for an episode or you have a correction or we've said a thing insane, do you pronounce Uranus wrong? Comment below, leave a comment below, like this video. If you're on YouTube, share, subscribe, ring the bell, do all of the other stuff. I think you're supposed to bop it and then twist it and then pull it, if you remember that reference. And you're old like me. And yeah, I'm John Norgrove. This is Julie Norgrove. This has been the Horn
and Cauldron podcast.
I forgot what I was going to say entirely. Oh, leave us a review if you're on the podcast networks. There you go. Bing, bang, boom. Got it,
That's
guys.
the only way we know that people are listening.
That's true. Yeah, that's the only way we know. I mean, like, technically, I have a thing that's supposed to tell me, and what it tells me both does and does not make a ferocious amount of sense.
Oh, podcast metrics are an absolute nightmare.
Podcast networks are a nightmare. And
being a small creator is a wild thing.
Yeah, and of course all of our links are down below, and if you would like us to do an episode on a specific topic or something like that, you can obviously comment about it. You can hit us up on social media. All of those are going to be below. You can also send us an email on our website, almost as though we're pros, and the link to the website is down below, as well as all of the other sundry things we do.
Yeah.
So check that out. If you're a Trekkie, we're doing Star Trek reviews again, guys. What's up?
Yeah. And coming up soonish, we're going to be doing a 2022 costume vlog wrap up, as well as like more gardening stuff to come on like the social media, and I'll probably do a couple of videos about it because we're doing like seeds and such like that. So for the garden. So yeah, stay tuned for all that kind of stuff, and we will catch you guys on the flip side, I guess, right? We're gonna do flip side stuff. Yeah, sure.
So we'll catch you guys on the flip side. Stay magical, folks.
Yeah, and don't forget, breathe in self-confidence and breathe out self-doubt.